Welcome to NTD News. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Here are today's top stories. 2020 Democratic hopefuls took the stage last night in Atlanta, Georgia, just hours after public testimony in the Democrat-led impeachment investigation. The candidates, who range from moderate to self-proclaimed socialist, sparred over hot topics like impeachment and the future of U.S. health care. President Trump is expected to sign 2 bills in support of Hong Kong residents today. Both bills made their final rounds through Congress this week. The bills had almost unanimous support despite threats from the Chinese Communist regime. Following testimony from the U.S. ambassador to the European Union yesterday, the White House says it's clear there was no quid pro quo. But within the ambassador's testimony, there were also things the White House didn't agree with. And a deadly fungus is spreading across the U.S. It affected over 400 people in 2018. An expert says it resists antibiotics and that the overuse of antibiotics has helped it spread. Impeachment dominated the opening segment of the 5th Democratic debate last night. It came just hours after the latest public testimony in the Democrat-led impeachment inquiry.
Candidate and former Vice President Joe Biden is at the center of the impeachment investigation alongside his son Hunter. During the debate in Atlanta, Georgia, he said he learned from the hearings that neither President Trump nor Russia's Vladimir Putin want him to win the Democratic nomination. If the House passes articles of impeachment, next there would be a trial in the Senate. In that case, Democratic Senators Bernie Sanders, Amy Klobuchar, Kamala Harris, and Elizabeth Warren would be in a unique position. They would preside as jury at the Senate trial of the president while also campaigning against him in the 2020 election. 2/3 of senators need to vote for impeachment to remove him from office.
The tough part's going to be succeeding in a trial in the Senate because it would require a couple dozen Republicans to actually vote for impeachment. There's been no indication that that would happen.
With less than 3 months before the first voting contest, other big questions hang over the frontrunners. One of the biggest is the future of health care in America. Biden countered that many people are happy with the private insurance through their jobs. Mayor Pete Buttigieg of South Bend, Indiana, complained that some candidates were trying to order people into universal health care, quote, whether they like it or not, unquote. The White House has not commented on the debate.
President Trump said today that he will release a financial statement before the presidential election. He emphasized it was his decision to release the information. He wrote on Twitter, "I'm clean, and when I release my financial statement, it will only show one thing, that I am much richer than people even thought, and that is a good thing." New York passed a law earlier this year that would allow a House committee to access Trump's state tax returns. Trump fought to overturn it. The case is now being dealt with in the Supreme Court. And President Trump could sign 2 bills today intended to support protesters in Hong Kong. The bills were passed in the House of Representatives on Wednesday.
The House voted 417-1 for the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act and 417-0 for the second bill, which would ban the export of certain crowd control munitions to Hong Kong police forces. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi called it a proud day for Congress.
Today, the Congress is sending an unmistakable message to the world that the United States stands in solidarity with freedom-loving people of Hong Kong, and we fully support their fight for freedom.
The House used an expedited process to quickly act on the Senate bill rather than trying to reconcile it with a slightly different version, which passed last month. That was the quickest way to approve the legislation before Congress breaks for the Thanksgiving holiday next week. Beijing warned Washington of strong countermeasures if President Trump signs off on legislation supporting Hong Kong protesters.
Trump has around 10 days to respond. Media reports say a person familiar with the matter indicated that he does intend to send them into law. And hundreds of Hong Kongers gathered in a central business district today to support those still trapped in PolyU.
Hundreds gather at the International Financial Center in Hong Kong at lunchtime to show their support for the city's ongoing protests.
I'm here to protest. We are here to voice out our message. We are so angry about the government now and the police force now. They're killing, they're murdering, they're massacring the Hong Kong people.
They chanted slogans like "Stand for freedom, stand with Hong Kong," 5 demands, not one less, and sang what many protesters now call the Hong Kong national anthem, "Glory to Hong Kong," which was created during the protests. Some explained that they want to preserve their freedoms and why they did not want to live under the rule of the Chinese Communist Party.
There are lots of acts that the Communist Party is doing in China that is illegal and, it's anti-human.
Meanwhile, protesters holed up in Polytechnic University surrounded by riot police are pondering their fate. There are fewer than 100 of them remaining on the site. Michelle, a 20-year-old student, says she chose to stay behind.
No matter how the police are threatening us outside and doing a lot of things to create horror, such as sending plainclothes on campus, using loudspeakers shouting at us, playing surrender songs every day, I hope that everyone can continue to be strong.
Just can't believe we don't know how to go back home.
Violent clashes between police and protesters have been less common over the past few days. This may be because of the intense protests we saw on Sunday and Monday night. However, on local social media platforms, people have been encouraged to not risk getting arrested before this Sunday's elections. Paul Graney, NTD News, Hong Kong.
And in the evening there, several hundred people joined a sit-in protest at Yoho Mall in the city center. The White House says statements by U.S. Ambassador to the European Union, Gordon Sondland, during public testimony yesterday show there was no quid pro quo. White House Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham released a statement Wednesday afternoon amid the hearing. She wrote that, quote, "No quid pro quo ever occurred. The U.S. aid to Ukraine flowed, no investigation was launched, and President Trump has met and spoken with President Zelensky." She drew attention to remarks like this one.
President Trump, when I asked him the open-ended question, as I testified previously, "What do you want from Ukraine?" his answer was, "I want nothing. I want no quid pro quo. Tell Zelensky to do the right thing."
Trump also echoed the statement, reading the transcript of Sondland's testimony from a notepad to reporters. However, Sondland alleged there was quid pro quo, though not tied to military aid to Ukraine. He said it had to do with a White House visit with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. He thought Trump wanted a statement on investigations into former Vice President Joe Biden and his son Hunter. But he added that was his personal guess, not a directive from the president. Meanwhile, Vice President Mike Pence's office issued a statement disputing another of Sondland's claims made during the hearing. In Sondland's opening statement, he said he brought up concerns about withholding military aid during a September 1st meeting with Pence in Warsaw. Pence's chief of staff, Mark Short, said in a statement that the vice president never spoke with Sondland about investigating the Bidens, Burisma, or the conditional release of financial aid to Ukraine. President Trump said he asked Apple CEO Tim Cook yesterday to help develop telecommunications infrastructure for 5G in the U.S. Trump tweeted this morning, "They have it all: money, technology, vision, and Cook." Trump met with Cook yesterday during his visit to an Apple factory in Texas. Trump has said that the U.S. intends to deploy 5G services rapidly. He wants to cooperate with like-minded nations to promote security in next-generation 5G networks. The U.S. has been pressing nations not to grant Chinese company Huawei access to future 5G networks, saying Huawei's equipment could be used by Beijing for spying. And General Motors yesterday filed a lawsuit against automaker rival Fiat Chrysler. The lawsuit alleges racketeering was the auto workers' union.
General Motors is accusing Fiat Chrysler and former Fiat Chrysler officials of engaging in bribery in the collective bargaining process with the United Auto Workers Union, leading to wage and work practice advantages. They say Fiat Chrysler corrupted the collective bargaining process with the union from 2009 through 2015, paying millions of dollars in bribes. 3 former Fiat Chrysler officials, who already pled guilty in a federal corruption probe of the union, were also named in this new lawsuit. GM's chief counsel Craig Glidden is arguing that the bribes allowed Fiat Chrysler to reduce labor costs in ways denied to GM, which damaged GM's business. Glidden also says GM is suing Fiat Chrysler and not the union because he believes Fiat Chrysler holds responsibility. At 4 p.m. Wednesday, GM and Fiat Chrysler shares both touched session lows, falling more than 3% and approximately 4% respectively.
And moving on to a deadly fungus spreading across the U.S. The CDC has labeled this antibiotic east an urgent threat. NTD's Miguel Moreno has the story from a doctor who says we've reached the post-antibiotic era.
Superbugs aren't anything new, but these drug-resistant germs are getting stronger. The CDC declared 4 germs an urgent threat this year. So we sat down with Dr. Amesh Adalja from Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, who broke down one of these germs for us.
With fungi, we're really interested in one specifically. It's something called Candida auris, which is a highly drug-resistant fungus that often preys on people in hospitals and has a very high mortality rate.
He said fungal cells are similar to human cells, which makes this superbug harder to treat than bacteria.
It makes it much more challenging that you have something that just targets the fungus without targeting the human.
Plus, over time, these superbugs develop stronger defenses against antibiotics. Fever and chills are some of the most common symptoms of Candida auris infections, and health centers in New York City carry much of the nation's burden. In 2016, a total of 37 cases were detected, 228 in 2017, and in 2018, just over 400 total cases were detected. But what has led to this superbug era? Unnecessary prescriptions are one reason.
We have to get rid of this antibiotic culture with people demanding antibiotics for every cough and sniffle that doesn't really require antibiotics.
The CDC reports that 1 in 3 antibiotics prescribed are unnecessary. The doctor said physicians are enticed by good patient reviews.
Take the patient complaint. I've done it myself, taken the patient complaint and not prescribed somebody an antibiotic when it wasn't warranted. It's worth it to have administration yell at you for not prescribing an unnecessary antibiotic. Should be a badge of honor for physicians.
And the CDC's report also says that livestock can be given antibiotics that they don't need. Over time, this can produce drug-resistant germs that can spread to people through food and contact. Miguel Moreno, NTD News, New York.
The maker of Cheese Nips is recalling some of its popular crackers. Mondelez Global says that small pieces of yellow plastic may have ended up in the product. The recall affects the 11-ounce boxes with the expiration date between May 18th and 20th next year. Mondelez says the plastic pieces may have fallen from a food scraper during the production process. The FDA says that no other products are affected and that it did not receive any reports of anyone being injured or getting sick. And up next, the UK's Prince Andrew says he is willing to help with investigations into Jeffrey Epstein following his announcement that he would step down from public royal duties. More on that after the break. An Associated Press investigation into the Catholic Church's sexual abuse review boards deems them ineffective. They say the boards could be enabling further cover-ups of clergy abuse.
U.S. Catholic leaders created mandatory review boards to deal with thousands of cases of clergy sex abuse and cover-up. These independent panels, made up of lay people in each diocese, were supposed to review victim allegations and ensure that no abusive priests stayed in ministry.
In my estimation, review boards are a smokescreen. They are an opportunity for the church to say we're doing something.
After almost 2 decades, the AP investigation of review boards across the country found they have largely failed to uphold their commitments. Riley Kinn was assured he'd have an opportunity to share his story with the board after bringing his case to the Diocese of Toledo in 2017. He wanted to tell them about being abused by a priest at his high school, but was told by the board his claims were unsubstantiated.
These review boards, we're going backwards. Why can't I tell my story?
The investigation found that the boards routinely undermined sex abuse claims from victims, shielded accused priests, and helped the church avoid payouts. The investigators checked all of the roughly 178 dioceses in the U.S. for information, reviewed thousands of pages of church and court records, and interviewed more than 75 abuse survivors, board members, and others.
Lawyers for victims of sex offender Jeffrey Epstein say the UK's Prince Andrew should speak to U.S. investigators immediately. The prince withdrew from public duties yesterday following public outcry over his association with Epstein, a convicted pedophile.
Attorney Gloria Allred said Andrew should contact American authorities without conditions and without delay. Andrew, the Duke of York, announced on Wednesday that he was stepping back from public duties for the foreseeable future. He said he was willing to help any appropriate law enforcement agency with their investigations if required. The prince gave an interview on British television last week about his friendship with Epstein. Andrew has received criticism for saying that he still did not regret the friendship. In the interview, Andrew denied having sex with a minor who she says had been trafficked by Epstein. Lord Falconer, a former UK Justice Secretary, says that it is right for him to step down considering the seriousness of Epstein's crimes.
The Duke of York became embroiled in this. We don't know precisely what his involvement was, but his involvement requires to be properly examined by somebody.
Attorney Allred has asked for clarity from the prince whether a subpoena is needed for their investigation or if he is willing to speak to law enforcement without being legally required to do so.
Up next, a success for Australian female claimants in a case against Johnson & Johnson about pelvic mesh implants. The Australian federal court said the pharmaceutical company had misled patients and surgeons over the risks of the product. More on that when we return. More than 1,350 Australian women won a class action lawsuit against Johnson & Johnson today. The women say the pharmaceutical company misled patients and surgeons about the risks of pelvic mesh implants.
Ethicon is part of Johnson & Johnson's medical devices companies. Australia's federal court found that Ethicon sold the devices without warning women about the gravity of the risks.
Today, the court was scathing in its findings with respect to Ethicon and Johnson & Johnson.
The suit is one of many that Johnson & Johnson has faced in the United States, Canada, and Europe over the implants. Special counsel Jen Kauska said the court found that the product should not have been sold and that consumers have suffered harm as a result. Patients said they had suffered chronic pain, bleeding, and severe discomfort after having the mesh surgically implanted. The implants were used to treat urinary incontinence and pelvic organ prolapse. The claimant said that in many cases the mesh eroded internally, causing infections and other complications, and was near impossible to remove completely. Julie Davis is the original claimant in the case.
I always knew that they should be held accountable, and in my heart of hearts today has put that right in the limelight. And the corporates have a lot to answer for, especially that they've treated women essentially like guinea pigs, lied about it, and done nothing to help.
In October, Johnson & Johnson agreed to pay nearly $117 million to resolve claims in 41 U.S. states and the D.C. The judge in the Australia case has set the next hearing for February, where damages will be discussed.
Bushfires in Australia continue to spread. Residents in Sydney are sheltering indoors to avoid breathing in the smoke.
Bushfires in Australia spread to the state of Victoria on Thursday as firefighters continue to battle hundreds of blazes across several states. Authorities in Victoria issued a code red alert, indicating the worst possible bushfire conditions, saying that the fires would be fast-moving, unpredictable, and likely uncontrollable. It's also the first time that the state issued such an alert in 10 years. Officials have warned some towns in the state that it was already too late to evacuate, and that their safest option is to take shelter indoors. Residents of Sydney in the state of New South Wales were urged to keep children indoors as pollution from the smoke engulfed the city for the third straight day at a level 5 times considered hazardous. The fires, sparked by high temperatures and strong winds, have burned through 2.5 million acres of bush and farmland and destroyed more than 400 homes. They've also claimed the lives of 4 people in the process. Years of drought have left bushland susceptible to fire, an issue that's put increasing pressure on Prime Minister Scott Morrison as the fires continue to burn.
Up next, electric cars are the talk of the Los Angeles Auto Show. Car makers like Audi are following Ford, debuting the latest in electronic cars. Also present was the Land Rover Defender, as featured in the upcoming Bond movie No Time to Die. Find out more when we return. Uber reportedly wants to start listening in during customers' rides. That's according to a report by the Washington Post. The ride-sharing giant is set to start testing the feature in December in Latin America. The idea is to provide better security for Uber customers. This move comes after several high-profile assault scandals and growing safety concerns. But implementing it in the U.S. will be challenging, as states have different laws regarding voice recordings and privacy. And the electric car craze dominated discussions at the Los Angeles Auto Show yesterday, with car makers like Audi following Ford and debuting new models in the fast-growing market. The German premium brand Audi added its second electric vehicle ever, debuting the Audi e-tron Sportback.
Now we are adding a more expressive, more design-oriented, coupe-like styled model, which we're calling e-tron Sportback.
The car is part of a wider push by Audi to have 30 electric or hybrid vehicles by 2025.
We wanted to build a true Audi. We built it out for all the safety systems. We built it out to perform well in a crash. We built it out to perform well and drive well.
The debuts came days after Ford Motor Company unveiled the Mustang Mach-E electric sport utility vehicle. The Mach-E is the first of a more than dozen all-electric automobiles the company plans to launch by 2022, with an investment of $11.5 billion as it moves away from traditional gasoline-powered cars. Also making its North America debut at the LA Auto Show was the return of the Land Rover Defender, an SUV last made in 1997. The car also has contemporary touches common in modern cars.
So 3 elements of breadth of capability: the off-road, the on-road, and the connected capability. That's the package that this car really delivers.
He cited the Defender's navigation system, enhanced camera system, and smartphone connectivity as the car's modern upgrades. The British luxury vehicle was also used in the upcoming James Bond movie No Time to Die.
If you've seen the outtakes from the movie already, they weren't playing around. They were using that car to the extreme. So we like to say as well, this car is the choice of experts.
The automaker put the same vehicle used in the film with its mud-painted body on the floor of the auto show for fans of the franchise. A big discovery for NASA. A team of scientists say they found sugars in meteorites that crashed into Earth billions of years ago. The discovery could give clues to the origin of life. 3 meteorites were analyzed, including one that landed in Australia in 1969. Previous studies investigated the meteors for sugars, but researchers recently used a different extraction method. The biggest discovery suggests extraterrestrial sugar might have contributed to the formation of ribose. Scientists say the material helps build proteins for our bodies. Researchers are calling it remarkable that this type of sugars were found in such ancient material. And that's all for now. Thanks for tuning in. Join us again tonight. I'm Tiffany Meyer.